that we were speaking about. One is that we have to understand the Torah in the context of God, not the Torah in the context of the Torah alone. Almost always teaching us to look at the big picture, as we mentioned, because just like it is with human relationships, I can't understand the other if I don't know where the other is coming from. I can relate to his words, but I have to relate to the person behind his words. Same with God. When God teaches us about the ox and the donkey, fine, absolutely. He is speaking about an ox and he is speaking about a donkey, and that halakha or that mitzvah is important, but we also have to look at the bigger picture where God is coming from. And without really relating to the giver of the Torah, when learning Torah, then we can't really fully study. That's number one. Number two, last week we spoke a little bit about the goal of learning is really to exercise the learning and at the same time to ensure that we act divinely. If we are learning Torah and the Torah is divine, then it ought to make us divine. And if it does not make us divine, then maybe we're not learning it right. And that makes us divine not just in behavior or in being, but also in doing, in action. That was the other big idea. So let's continue right here.
What makes learning Torah the right way? You say we're not doing it right. What makes it right?
Okay, that's good question. So I'm going to quote Rabbi Steinsaltz, who each and every year after towards the end of the school year, while we were in high school, he would come and visit us. He would visit us often. He would teach us also often, but he had a peculiar speech to all the high school students before the summer vacation each year. And in his speech, he would tell us, look, I don't really know if you've grown this year. I don't really know if you've studied this year. But I want you to go home now during the summer vacation and ask your parents, ask your brothers and sisters if they think that you've grown. If yes, then you can come back next year and we'll continue to study together. If not, then maybe it wasn't worth being here altogether. Maybe you should stay home or go somewhere else. And that's my answer to you, Ronnie. I don't know if we can be true judges to our growth, but certainly our surroundings can. We can ask our spouses, we can ask our children, we can ask our siblings, and then we'll know if really our study has made an impact. But what this deeply means, and what Rabbi Steinsaltz I think referred to, is also that the Torah has to be shaking us so much that makes changes in our lives, practical changes in our lives, changes for the good, of course. And everyone now has their own journey, so everyone has their own changes to make. But it certainly needs to make us better people and I think more in tune also with our general God-given purpose.
Rabbi, don't you think also it is because we want to be more than just a material world?
Sorry? I'm sorry.
I think it's because we want to be in more than just a material world. We're seeking something deeper that we probably had in our past, and it kind of was easing away, and we want to bring it back.
Right, absolutely. That's right. And it's the soul telling us that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. That you're much more than the material person you are. I know Madonna said, I'm a material girl, but she's much more than that. Even she is much more than that. And so are we. That's correct. Yes. Yeah. Well said. Yeah. Ronnie, did you want to add to that?
No, we're fine.
No, okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. Fine. So let's continue here on page 148. Does anyone want to read? When the thinking mind. Anyone? Please.
I got it, Rabbi.
Oh, thank you, Jordan. Thank you.
Okay. When the thinking mind and the concept of which it is thinking mutually enclose each other, what happens is not just contact between them, but unity and full identification. Whether considering an abstract concept, a story, or a legal ruling, at the moment that the mind is getting to understand it from every angle, it is fused with that thought in a wonderful union, a union that has no parallel in any of the other unions we know. In the material world, we encounter certain intrinsic barriers that we cannot surmount. The encloser and the enclosed, the I and the other, cannot be united because their difference is a part of the definition of material existence. By contrast, in the sphere of conscious ideas, in the relationship between comprehender and the comprehended, the encloser can also be the enclosed, the difference between them becoming diffused until there is unison, until there is union and utter identification from every angle.
Right. So let's stop here. So I would put it this way. I think there are, and elsewhere in Hasidic thoughts, it speaks about this, that there are three types of unities. There is a materialistic unity, which is what he's referring to, that it can't be full because the I has barriers. And even if I'm uniting with something material, there's still differences. There's no complete fusion. So for example, right now I'm sitting on this chair right here. So in a way I'm united with this chair, but there's still differences between me and the chair. And we have different reasons for which maybe we are uniting. So the unity is not complete in the materialistic world. Then there's the unity of mind. When I learn an idea, it could be any idea, whether it's mathematics or whether it's history or biology, I learn an idea, that idea becomes one with my mind. The unity is much stronger, it's much deeper. But again, that unity is not yet complete because still the knowledge of that thing is not really an essential part of me. It's a thought that I have. It's an idea that might stay in my mind also. But the idea and me are two separate things. There's the idea and there is me. Sometimes I could agree with the idea, sometimes I could disagree with the idea, but it's not me. And then there's the unity of the divine. And then unity of the divine, when I study Torah, for example, then that unity becomes so strong that it becomes a part of me. Why? Because it was always a part of me. It was a part of me that I lost, a part of me that somehow maybe drifted away. And when I connect to the Torah, all of a sudden, it's like finding something that I lost, finding a part of me that I knew I had. I just hadn't had it until that point. And then it's one with me. Maybe that's why the Talmud tells us that in the womb of our mothers, we study the entire Torah. Right? Remember that Talmudic quote? And then an angel slaps us and we forget it all. And the question is if he slaps here, and that's why we have this mark. Some people say that, but I don't know. The Talmud says it slaps. So I don't know whether it creates a mark or not. But, and the story is about kids that were not slapped, and they indeed knew the entire Torah by heart. Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu, the chief rabbi of Israel, who passed away some 10 years ago, he was a truly holy man, and I had the privilege of meeting him multiple times. But Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu would tell the story of this child who was born in Jerusalem, who knew the whole Torah, everything. And he would say, Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu was a follower of the Ben Ish Chai, who was a Baghdadi rabbi, one of the most dominant halachic authorities, I believe, in Jewish history, although he lived only 150 years ago. But still, he wrote a whole magnum opus called the Ben Ish Chai on Jewish law. And Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu says that this child even knew the Ben Ish Chai, which was a tremendous merit for the Ben Ish Chai, because it shows that in heaven and in the wombs of Jewish mothers, the Ben Ish Chai is learned, which means that his Torah is as holy as the Torah of Mount Sinai, or is as one with the Torah's Mount Sinai. But so the children who didn't have that slap. But the point is that therefore, when we study Torah, even if we've forgotten the Torah, it resonates so deeply because it was once a part of us, and now we just found something that was a part of us that comes back to us and that unifies with us in the most essential way. That's the power of Torah, and that's the unity of Torah that he's speaking about here. And in a way, I think also on a different level, beyond that Talmudic quote, not only are we, when we study Torah, are we really reconnecting a part of us that was lost or forgotten? We're reconnecting it to our very essence. But also the study of the Torah speaks to our deeper self. The deeper self is the divine soul. The divine soul is a part of God. So when we study God and God's words, then automatically it becomes one with the part of God that's in us. God and God joining those two pieces together and becoming one. That's the unity of the divine that comes from Torah study. Yes, Ronnie.
Excuse me.
Sure.
So here's a question for you. So we study Torah, but is it not until we know Torah that when we stop studying, Torah is still with us, that it doesn't disappear, that we live with it every moment in our life?
So that's an excellent question. So the study of the Torah makes an impact, even though it might not be seen sometimes or might not even be felt. Again, because it's almost like, I hate to use this analogy, but it just happened to me last week, and I thought about it. I had to jump my car because my battery was dying, and there's a click that happens, right? There's those sparks that happen when you put the red and the black on the screws of your battery. There's something that happens there. So that's what happens, and of course on a much deeper and spiritual level. When we study Torah, it clicks. The electricity went through, and sometimes it makes an impact. Sometimes the battery is rebooted. Sometimes it's not, but you see the spark nonetheless, and something happens. Now, beyond that, I will say that the study of the Torah also creates almost a protection, a level of protection for the human being. The Talmud as a whole passage that speaks about whether the Torah protects us only when we study it or even when we don't study it. And the conclusion is that it protects us even when we don't study it. Magne umatzli. And we see that by Jacob. When Jacob studied Torah for 21 years, that study of the Torah continued to protect him. How do we know that? After he left his father-in-law's house, where he stayed there for 21 years, and he studied Torah there for 21 years, day and night, he went to meet Esav, who wanted to kill him. And during the meeting, Esav has a change of mind. Or at least he doesn't kill him. And I think it's in Tractate of Shabbat, Talmud points out that was the protection of the Torah that protected him. So on a spiritual level also, there's something that the study of the Torah does towards our own self-protection.
What about the David Melech, who he stopped
William, you're not coming through.
Yeah.
Torah,
William, you're not coming through.
Yeah, William, only a few
and
words.
then
William, only a few words were coming through. Maybe it's the connection, but let's try that one more time.
okay, I was just saying,
Yes.
King David was made to stop his studies so that the Malach HaMavet could do his work.
Right.
So
Exactly.
it's
So that's a good point. That's right. There's another passage in the Talmud that speaks about King David, who had to, be told to transition to the next world. Yet he was studying Torah, and the angel of death could not touch him because he was studying Torah. So he distracted him by moving a tree nearby, and King David looked at the tree and interrupted his studies, and that's when he got him. So the question is, how much does it protect you? From the angel of death, probably not. But from other things, maybe yes, or probably yes. Yeah, but you're right. That's a fascinating midrash.
you could have unity of the divine by prayer.
Oh, that's a good question. So, can the unity can that third level of unity come through prayer? So it depends what type of prayer. Because it comes through Torah, because if you think about this, and it's an important question, because Torah and prayer, if you think about this, really are two opposite things. Torah is God coming towards me. He came down Mount Sinai, gave me the Torah, it's for me to study it now. Prayer, it's me climbing towards God. So those two ideas have two opposite directions. When God comes towards me, all I need to do is access him and I'm connected. When I go towards God, I've got to find God. Some prayers, Kabbalah teachers rarely remain here in this world. And Tanya also has a whole chapter about how prayer in general, or the service of the heart, needs to have wings for it to fly all the way to God. What are the wings? Ahava and yira, love and awe. If I don't have those two emotions, then those prayers can't fly. I remember that Rabbi Stans would often walk into synagogues and he would say, oh, the ceiling is full of prayers here. Prayers maybe don't fly further than that. So it depends. If it's a prayer that is truly a prayer of klot nefesh, what's called in Hasidic thought or in Kabbalistic thought, which is the expiration of the soul. That's the literal translation of it. When my soul is just flies into ecstasy, then yes, then that connection happens. So it could happen in prayer, but not always. In Torah, it almost always happens. You know, the Rabbi Stans would also tell this story very often about a man living just outside of Jerusalem. He was a poor man, an ignorant man. And from time to time, he would come to Jerusalem to ask the rabbi how he should pray and what's the calendar like also. Are there any new holidays with new prayers? And the rabbi would tell him in the book, here, yes, Tuesday, we have this holiday, you should pray this. And he would guide him almost on a monthly basis. One day, this man comes into town, and by the way, I think this was just put on video somewhere of Rabbi Stern speaking in the story. But this man comes into town and he looks for the rabbi and he sees that the town is shut down. And now he's upset at the rabbi because in his calendar that he had received from the rabbi just a few weeks before, didn't say that there was any holiday on this day. So he doesn't understand whether the town is shut down, and it only shuts down during holidays. So he goes back to the rabbi and says, Rabbi, you cheated me. You didn't tell me about this holiday. What's wrong with you? The rabbi says, no, there's no holiday right now. Everyone shut down their businesses because today's a fast day. So he says, why didn't you tell me about the fast day? You should have told me. And he says, no, this was a fast day that we decided to do way after you left because there is no rain in Jerusalem. And we decided to fast to ask God for rain. So the man says, there's no rain in Jerusalem. Why don't you just ask God for rain? It works with me. When there's no rain in my village, I just go out and I say, God, I want rain. And rain falls. And look, let me try it now. And he goes outside and says, God, I need rain. And all of a sudden, the heavens were covered with clouds and it began to pour. So the rabbi went to this man and he says, you know what? You don't need me anymore. You continue to pray the way you are praying. It works just fine. And I'm telling you the story because in a way, sometimes we get stuck in the prayers and they become almost an impediment to our soul. And we can't lose that in the text, in the details of the words. We have to allow ourselves to really fly to the heavens when we pray. Now, it's probably not sometimes, at least for me, it's always impossible to have that level of connection throughout the entire prayer. But I think there should be moments within every prayer in which we have that elevation, that ecstasy. And then we can connect to God. And then that same connection happens, yeah.
We get to go back and forth between, even in our prayer service, there's Torah and Talmud. So there's study. And then there's prayer, right. Personal prayer. So it's constructed so that there's moments where God's communicating with us. Yeah. And then the next moment we're communicating with God. Right. So there's that. And also when you find something that catches your mind and your heart, you can stay with that. I mean, you generously call out the pages. We'll know where we are if we get left behind. Right. So we stay with what captures our are being like on that on any one Shabbos. It's not always the same thing, of course.
Right.
You know, so
No, it's true. It's true, and it's very true also that within Torah you have those directions. So going back to Rabbi Steinsaltz, he would tell us very often, not just the high school students or people in his yeshiva, but really anyone who would want to study Torah, he would tell people that there are only 4 books really that you need to know. What were those 4 books? The whole Tanakh, the whole Bible, the whole Talmud. And then he would tell you, you can pick between any all-encompassing book of halacha of Jewish law. So it could be the Code of Jewish Law or Maimonides, you pick. And then the whole Zohar. These are the only 4 books I want you to know. As you know, to learn these books, you need a whole lifetime sometimes. But he wanted you to know these 4 books. Now, by the way, I have to mention, Rabbi Stans would study these books every year on his birthday. And I had the privilege of being at his birthday Farbrengens quite often. But he would have a siyum. A siyum means when you complete a tractate of the Talmud, but he would complete the whole Babylonian Talmud and whole Jerusalem Talmud every single birthday, and sometimes the whole Zohar and sometimes also the whole Rambam. But that meant that he learned the entire thing throughout the year. Now, Rabbi Schnauz would study the Talmud, and I've seen him study the Talmud almost like this, as if it was some, novel. But, and it's much harder to study than a novel, of course, but he did it himself. So what he preached, he did. But why these 4 books, going back to the study of the Torah and those different conversations we have with God? So he would say this, simple. God, the Tanakh, the whole Bible, is God speaking to us. The Talmud is us speaking to God. Halacha is what you need to do in life. You need a compass, you need a GPS. And Zohar is don't forget your spiritual self. If you can have these 4, then you can somehow strive to be wholesome. But without these 4, you can't. So even in the study of Torah, there are those 2 opposite directions, right? God coming to us, the Tanakh, and us going to God, the Talmud, us questioning God. But they're essential in that connection, in creating that connection.
And they're all 4 are in the prayer service.
Yeah, in the prayer service too. That's correct.
That's right. They're all 4 represented.
Yeah, I think that's the
power
note that I just got, Rabbi Eisen. I'm not going to allow you to remain anonymous because these are very powerful words. And yet there are times when prayer seems more like God speaking to us. More powerful and embraced that way, which is the preferred path to pursue. That's correct. Sometimes prayer is not us speaking, it's us being silent and listening to what God has to say to us. That's right. And maybe, allow God to begin the conversation. And you can continue it. But you come into prayer with silence. It's the right thing to do also. I mean, when you meet anyone that's honorable, whether it's the Queen of England or I don't know, someone else, and you sit down for a meeting, you let them start the meeting. You're not gonna vomit all your words on them. Here's too with God, I think with prayer, sometimes we have to allow God to start the meeting. Let's see what he wants.
Rabbi, didn't you teach us?
Can I raise a specific example?
Sorry?
Can I raise a specific example?
Yes, please, Rabbi Eisen, yes.
So in the 2nd paragraph of the Amidah, the Gevurot, where there is a line that says, okay, so who keeps faith with those who lie in the dust is one of the liberal translations interpretations. So the prayer itself, we're asking, are we asking God for resurrection, for life, this, Or sometimes, and we pray our hearts out, whatever. But when that operative phrase comes to mind sometimes, it's sort of not reaching higher, but saying, wait a minute, where is this happening? Where are those opportunities for God to enter our life and to find ourselves raised up from the dust, so to speak? So it's not me trying to raise up higher, but rather God calling out and pulling us up. And I think that a lot of the different the different sections and liturgical landmarks could be interpreted or understood that way. And I sometimes find that much more powerful than saying, gimme, get me, do this for me.
That's
which
right.
is the normal way. People used to come to me and say, Hasagat Gvul. I shouldn't be talking like a rabbi.
No, God forbid. Go for it, Rabbi.
People come to me and say, I asked, and I didn't get it. I said, and in my early years, you said, well, sometimes God can say no, but I don't like that. I don't like that approach, because then God's a vending machine. You put in the quarter, you get now it's $2, you get the candy bar. But I don't like that approach. Whereas if you're saying, no, God is there, we just have to open our eyes to see that God is there, we're ready to lift us up from the dust. It's a whole different understanding.
Yeah,
I think, and it makes the liturgy much more powerful.
Right. I love that. Thank you, Rabbi Eisen. And to continue that, because I've heard that before too, that God can say no. I would take that answer in a different direction. That sometimes God's no is a yes. And all you have to do is open up your eyes, open up your ears to listen to him. Right. Very well said. Yeah. Jordan, what did you want to say?
I'm sorry. I was thinking about what you said about who initiates the conversation.
Right.
And I was thinking that I believe that you had taught us that there's actually a halacha in terms of entering the synagogue that's required.
Right.
That we don't just walk into place and then start high-fiving whoever happens to be around, that there's an approach to it that allows for that understanding of the initiation of the conversation, I think. Right,
that's correct. Yeah, the halacha quotes the verse that says, "Vani berov chazdecha avo v'itecha ishtachaveh lechal kodshecha biratecha." Some synagogues have that verse engraved at the entrance. But what it says is that I, with your kindness, will enter your home, and then and then I will bow down to your presence, or to your ark, with awe. And you come in bowing down with awe. That's correct. Recognizing that there's the presence of God there, and let him speak to you. Yeah. They say that we should stop telling God how big our problems are. Rather, we should tell our problems how big God is. And in a way, prayer very often is telling God how big our problems are. But what Rabbi Eisen was saying, I think, is, well, how about you tell your problems how big God is? Listen to what God is saying towards your problems. And that's true. By the way, I believe it's true in relationships too. The more intimate the relationship is, the deeper the connection, and the greater that dialogue. Speaking of those levels of unity, when I have that deepest unity, the third level of unity, then there's a constant flow of connection, of communication. And it's very important. I want to connect this. Maybe we'll end with this thought, but connect this with yesterday's Torah portion. Some of it is very, very disturbing. Towards the end of Acharei Mot, we speak about all sorts of different prohibited relationships, sexual relationships. In fact, what's even more disturbing is that we read this portion towards the end of Yom Kippur, during the Mincha of Yom Kippur, when we're supposed to be all angelic. We read about all of these different prohibited sexual relationships. Some of them are just abhorrent.
Mm-hmm.
And but it reminded me really of those three levels of unity too within human relationships, because there are 3 ways, some say 4 ways, in which the sexual relationships are portrayed in the Torah. One way is legalot erva, which is what we read about yesterday, to expose nakedness. The other type of description to that is where Adam yada et chava ishto. Adam knew his wife Eve. Knew also refers to a marital relationship. And the third way is Yitzchak metzachek et Rivka ishto, that Yitzchak was laughing with his wife. That's another description for marital relationship. So you have exposing nakedness, that's the lowest level. Then you have knowledge, which is the second level. And then the third highest level is to laugh together. What does this mean? When you expose nakedness, basically you're exposing the materialistic side of the other. Just like I said, I'm united with this chair, but there's really no unity there. So it's just two bodies getting together on a very, very superficial and external level. When I'm speaking about the second level, then there's a connection there. Adam knew Eve. There's a connection of knowledge, that second type of unity. I'm united with that person. I understand my spouse's idea and she understands me. And there's certainly a very deep connection. But the highest connection is that I'm so one with the person that let me put it this way, just to better understand this. What makes a joke funny? What does make a joke funny? What makes a joke funny? Makes a joke funny is the punchline, right? You don't expect the punchline, so you laugh. Now, in a way, I'm so one with my spouse that life itself is a joke. Life itself is the punchline. I'm so one that we relate to life together from the same perspective, and everything that comes our way is just a nice surprise. And it's a nice surprise because we know that we are unbreakable together. We know that that unity is so essential that nothing can break us. So everything that we look at around us, even the challenging moments, is really a joke, is a punchline, will make us laugh. And that's that ultimate level of unity that I think that Rabbi Sternz is hinting to you, that I'm so united with God that nothing can get to me. God is with me, even when I face challenges. Okay, so I'll laugh at it. I know that I will laugh at it because I have that oneness with God. And that's the ultimate level to reach. Now, it can be reached through Torah study, mainly through Torah study, sometimes through prayer too, depending on how we approach prayer, as we said. And even if we don't experience it much, I think it's something that we can work on. I think the more we reach that level of unity, the more divine we will be and we will act, and certainly the more divine life and all of its jokes will be.